The room was too clean for grief. Everything smelled like lemon polish and paper, fresh, sharp, almost sterile, like loss could be wiped away if the surface shined enough. I sat at the long conference table with my hands folded in my lap, pressing my thumbs together to stop them from shaking. The hum of the overhead lights felt louder than it should have been, buzzing against the quiet like a warning. Across from me, my father looked comfortable, not sad, not shaken, comfortable. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, the same one he used for court dates and business meetings, and his posture was relaxed, confident, like this was exactly where he expected to be. His expression was calm in that familiar way that always meant he already had a plan. I knew that look better than I wanted to. The attorney, Mr. Klein, sat at the head of the table with a neat stack of documents in front of him. He offered a soft, professional smile to the room, the kind designed to acknowledge pain without stepping into it. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "I know this isn't easy." My Aunt Denise clutched a tissue she hadn't actually used. My cousin Trevor leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting toward the ceiling like he was waiting for a show to start. No one spoke. I swallowed and stared at the wood grain beneath my fingers. My name is Morgan Hale. I'm 27 years old, and 3 weeks ago I lost the only person in my family who ever made me feel safe. My grandmother, Ruth Hale, had been my anchor since I was a child. When my parents' arguments turned into silence, when my dad's promises evaporated the moment they became inconvenient, she was the one who picked up the pieces without asking questions. She made space. She listened. She remembered. She also remembered everything my father tried to forget. Grandma Ruth wasn't wealthy in a flashy way, but she was careful. She owned her small house outright, had savings she guarded fiercely, and she never let anyone, especially her son, handle her finances without watching every move. The last time I saw her alive, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "He's going to try." I didn't ask who. Mr. Klein opened the folder and cleared his throat. "This is the last will and testament of Ruth Eleanor Hale, executed on—" My father raised his hand. "Before we get into all that," he said smoothly, "I'd like to clarify something." Mr. Klein paused, pen hovering. "Mr. Hale, we usually address questions after the reading." Dad smiled, easy and practiced. "This will save time. I just want to be sure we're working from accurate documents." My stomach tightened. He hadn't come to listen. He'd come to control. "I was heavily involved in my mother's care toward the end," Dad continued. "She wasn't always herself. So if there's anything here that looks out of character, I think it's fair to flag that now." His eyes slid to me for a half-second before returning to the attorney. "People." I felt heat crawl up my neck. "Are you suggesting she didn't know what she was doing?" Dad laughed softly. "I'm saying grief makes people sensitive, Morgan. No one's accusing anyone." But he was. Mr. Klein's tone sharpened just slightly. "The will was executed properly, with witnesses and notarization. It is legally valid." Dad leaned back in his chair, hands folding across his chest. "Then read it." The words landed like a challenge. Mr. Klein adjusted his glasses and began again. The formal language filled the room, steady and precise, each sentence laying another brick into something permanent. Burial instructions, small bequests, donations. I listened, but my chest felt tight, like my body already knew what was coming. When the attorney reached the section about the estate, my pulse started racing. I bequeath the remainder of my estate, including my residence at 214 Maple Street and all associated financial accounts. Dad's posture changed. It was subtle, just a tightening of his jaw, a shift forward in his chair, but I saw it. Mr. Klein continued, "To my granddaughter, Morgan Elise Hale." Silence slammed down hard. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My grandmother did it. She followed through. Even knowing what would happen next, she chose anyway. Mr. Klein looked up at me gently. "Miss Hale?" "That's not right," my father said. The calm in his voice was almost worse than shouting. Mr. Klein blinked. "Excuse me?" Dad turned slightly, addressing the room like a jury. My mother wouldn't have done that without discussing it with me. She was confused toward the end, on medication, and Morgan, he gestured toward me, casual and dismissive, was suddenly very involved. My hands curled into fists. I was there because she asked me to be. Dad shook his head pityingly. She also thought the year was wrong. Let's not pretend she was making complex financial decisions. That wasn't true, and he knew it, but truth had never stopped him before. Mr. Klein straightened. "Mr. Hale, unless a court determines otherwise, the will scans as written." Dad's smile vanished. "Then we'll let a court decide, because I'm not letting my mother's life savings be handed over based on manipulation." The word hit me like ice water. Manipulation? I stood, my chair scraping loudly behind me. "She told you exactly what she wanted." Dad rose too, taller, closer, using his body like pressure. "She told you what you wanted to hear." Aunt Denise shifted uncomfortably. Trevor leaned forward now, suddenly interested. Mr. Klein held up a hand. "This meeting needs to remain professional." Dad ignored him. His gaze locked onto mine, sharp and assessing. "We can resolve this privately. Sign the house over to me. I'll make sure you're taken care of, fairly." "No," I said. The word came out steady, even though my heart was pounding. His eyes hardened instantly. "Then you're forcing this, and you won't like how it ends." Mr. Klein's voice cut in. "Mr. Hale, threats are inappropriate." Dad reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. The sight of it made my stomach drop. "Preparation isn't a threat, it's responsibility." He slid the folder onto the table, angling it just enough for me to see the top page. My grandmother's name, her signature, fresh, clean, undeniable. My breath caught. Dad met my eyes, satisfaction flickering across his face. "I'm contesting the will," he said, "effective immediately. She's not getting a dime." The room seemed to tilt. I wanted to scream that he was lying, that he was twisting things, that Grandma warned me about this exact moment. But all that came out was a quiet, burning realization. He hadn't come here to argue. He'd come to win. And whatever was in that folder, he believed it could erase my grandmother's final choice completely. As Mr. Klein stared down at the document, tension etched into his face, I understood something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't the beginning of a disagreement. It was the opening move of a war my father planned long before my grandmother took her last breath. And he was smiling because he thought I was already losing.
For a few seconds after my father said, "She's not getting a dime," no one spoke. The words didn't echo. They settled, heavy, certain, like he'd already written the ending in his head and was just waiting for the rest of us to catch up. Mr. Klein stared at the document Dad had slid across the table, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Aunt Denise's tissue finally crumpled in her hand. Trevor leaned forward, elbows on the table now, eyes darting between the paper and my face like he could already smell drama. I stayed standing. If I sat back down, I felt like I might disappear. Mr. Hale, Mr. Klein said carefully, I can't evaluate a document like this in a vacuum. Any challenge to the will must be handled formally through the court. Dad shrugged. Of course, that's what I'm saying. This, he tapped the folder, goes to my attorney today. I looked down at the signature again. Grandma's handwriting had always been precise, slanted slightly to the right, the kind of signature you develop when you're taught penmanship by someone who believed details mattered. This looked like hers, too much like hers. My chest tightened. You told me she didn't sign anything else, I said quietly. Dad turned to me, eyebrows lifting in mock concern. I told you she was confused. That doesn't mean she wasn't cooperative. The way he said cooperative made my stomach twist. Denise finally spoke, her voice shaky but louder than before. Richard, when did this happen? Dad didn't look at her. A few weeks before she passed. That's not true, I said. I was there almost every day. He smiled at me the way you smile at a child who insists they saw a unicorn. Not every day. Mr. Klein held up a hand. We're not litigating this here. Miss Hale, I strongly recommend you retain counsel immediately. Dad laughed under his breath. There it is, turning this into a legal circus. You already did, I said. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing, careful. The room felt smaller by the second. I could sense the shift happening, the subtle recalibration where people stopped seeing me as the grieving granddaughter and started seeing me as a problem, as someone standing in the way of the version of the story my father was offering them. Mr. Klein gathered the remaining papers. This meeting is concluded. I'll be in touch with both parties separately. Dad snapped his briefcase shut and stood. Good, because I don't intend to let this drag out. He stepped closer to me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You don't have the stomach for this. I met his gaze. You don't know me. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I made you. Trust me, I do. Denise stood as well, wringing her hands. Morgan, maybe you should think about what he's saying. Court gets ugly. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she was already backing away. Not from him, from me. I am thinking, I said. That's the problem. Dad brushed past me toward the door, then paused, turning back as if he'd forgotten something. Oh, he said casually, don't bother moving into the house. My heart jumped. Why? Because once the contest is filed, anything you do there can be framed as self-serving. Renovations, rentals, even staying overnight. He shrugged. I wouldn't want you accused of more manipulation. The word again. He opened the door and gestured for me to follow. Come on, we should talk privately, like family. Every instinct in me screamed not to go, but fear and anger twisted together in my chest, and I needed to know what he thought he had, what that signature really meant. The hallway outside the conference room was quiet, carpeted, neutral, safe-looking, a lie. Dad stopped near a window overlooking the parking lot and turned to face me, his expression shifting into something almost gentle. You could still end this today, he said. Sign the house over, let me manage the accounts. I'll give you a cut, enough to feel respected. Respected? I repeated. Yes, he said smoothly, not embarrassed, not dragged through court, not exposed. My hands trembled. Exposed how? He tilted his head. You really want to test how much a judge likes a sob story when there are gaps in your timeline? When people start asking why you suddenly got so involved at the end? My breath caught. I was helping her. And I'll say you were isolating her, he replied calmly. See how that works? The floor felt unsteady beneath me. You're lying. I sighed like he was exhausting me. I'm strategizing. I stared at him and something inside me shifted. The grief was still there, heavy and aching, but beneath it, something colder took hold. You planned this. He didn't deny it. I anticipated possibilities. You knew she was leaving it to me. His mouth twitched. I suspected. And you prepared anyway. He stepped closer, lowering his voice again. Because I don't lose what's mine. I thought of Grandma's warning. He's going to try. She knew it. Somehow she knew it. Dad straightened his jacket and glanced at his watch. My attorney's expecting me. I suggest you don't do anything rash.
I crossed my arms, forcing my hands still. "You already filed, didn't you?" His smile widened just a fraction. "This morning." The words hit hard. "So now what?" I asked. "Now," he said, turning toward the elevator, "you panic, or you get smart." He stepped inside, pressed the button, and looked back at me one last time. "Think carefully, Morgan, because if you push this, I will bring everything into the light." The doors slid shut. I stood alone in the hallway, my reflection faint in the glass, heart pounding, mind racing. Court, accusations, that signature, the way he said everything. For the first time since Grandma died, I wasn't just grieving, I was afraid. But as the fear settled, another thought surfaced, quiet, insistent, impossible to ignore. If my father was this confident, then he believed he knew every move I could make, and that meant there was only one way to survive what he'd started. I had to find whatever he didn't know, and fast.
By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice. The parking lot behind the law office was half empty, late afternoon light slanting across the asphalt in long, pale streaks. People walked past me carrying coffee cups and briefcases, living ordinary lives, completely unaware that mine had just cracked open. I sat in the driver's seat without turning the engine on and stared at the steering wheel until my breathing slowed. Dad's words kept replaying in my head, calm and sharp at the same time. "I already filed, this morning." He hadn't come to the will reading to react, he'd come to confirm his timing. My phone buzzed in my hand, a text from an unknown number. "Dad, before you talk to any lawyers, we should handle this like adults. Meet me tonight." I didn't reply. Instead, I drove straight to Mr. Klein's office and asked his assistant if he had a few minutes. Something in my face must have convinced her because she ushered me back without argument. Mr. Klein closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "You need representation," he said immediately. "Not tomorrow, today." "I know, but I need to understand what he showed you." He folded his hands on the desk. "I didn't get a full look, but if that document is what I think it is, it's likely a later dated statement or power-related agreement, possibly even a handwritten addendum." "She never told me about anything like that," I said. "That doesn't mean it doesn't exist," he replied gently. "Only that context will matter." Context. Another word that sounded harmless until you realized it could be twisted into anything. "He's claiming undue influence," I said, "that I manipulated her." Mr. Klein nodded. "That's a common angle when a non-primary heir feels excluded. Courts look at timelines, access, patterns of behavior." Access. I swallowed. He had access too. "That may work in your favor," he said, "but you need your own attorney to handle discovery, depositions, everything." I stood to leave, then hesitated. What if he's right about one thing? Mr. Klein's eyes softened. "About what?" "What if she did sign something else?" I said, "something he pressured her into?" "That wouldn't automatically override the will," he said, "especially if there's evidence of coercion." Evidence. I left his office with a list of referrals and a weight pressing down on my chest. By the time I got home, the sun was setting, painting the apartment walls gold and orange like nothing had changed, but everything had. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor. My phone buzzed again. "Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I turned the phone face down. After a few minutes, I forced myself up and walked into my bedroom. Grandma's ring sat on my dresser where I'd left it that morning, simple gold band, warm even now when I slipped it onto my finger. I twisted it slowly, grounding myself in the familiarity of it. "He's going to try," she'd said. I hadn't asked how she knew. I opened my laptop and started digging. Not legally yet, just memory, dates, moments, conversations I'd brushed aside at the time because I didn't want to believe my father was capable of something like this. The visits he insisted on having alone. The day he asked me to leave the room because this is mother-son business. The way Grandma's mood changed afterward. quieter, withdrawn. My stomach twisted. I called the nurse who'd been on duty most often during Grandma's last month. She didn't answer, but her voicemail message told me enough. She still worked at the facility. I left a careful message and hung up. Then I pulled out the folder I'd brought home from Grandma's house after the funeral. At the time, I'd only looked for sentimental things, letters, photos, recipes written in looping cursive. I hadn't searched it like someone preparing for war. Now I did. I spread everything across my bed: old tax statements, insurance papers, utility bills, a handwritten list of passwords Grandma never trusted herself to remember digitally. And then, at the bottom of the folder, something that didn't belong with the rest. A small manila envelope. No return address, just my name written on the front in Grandma's handwriting. My heart started pounding. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small flash drive taped to it. I stared at it for a long moment before touching it, like it might burn me. The note was short. "Morgan, if you're reading this, he tried. I'm sorry you have to see this side of him, but I need you protected. Listen before you do anything else." My hands shook as I picked up the flash drive. Protected. I slid it into my laptop, hesitating only a second before opening the single audio file inside. The timestamp showed a date from 2 weeks before Grandma passed. I pressed play. At first, there was only static and the faint sound of movement. Then Grandma's voice filled the room, weaker than I remembered, but unmistakably hers. "This is Ruth Hale," she said. "I'm recording this because my son thinks I don't understand what he's doing." My breath caught. She went on, slowly, clearly, explaining how Dad had pressured her, how he'd tried to scare her into signing documents she didn't agree with. She named names, she gave dates, she described conversations I wasn't present for. She described fear. Tears streamed down my face as I listened, my chest aching with a mix of grief and fury. Every word felt like a hand reaching through time, steadying me. Then her tone changed. "And if you're hearing this, Morgan," she said softly, "it means he didn't stop." I slammed the laptop shut before the recording finished, my heart racing. I wasn't ready, not yet, but I understood something with absolute clarity now. My father had come to the will reading armed with paper. My grandmother had come prepared with truth, and he had no idea what she'd left me. I wiped my face, opened my phone, and scrolled to my contacts. It was time to stop reacting. It was time to start building my case. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, the laptop closed on my desk like it was holding its breath, the flash drive tucked into the drawer beside my bed. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Grandma's voice again. Steady, tired, painfully clear. "My son thinks I don't understand what he's doing." The words changed something in me. Not loudly, not all at once, but permanently. By morning, my grief had rearranged itself into focus. I made coffee I barely tasted and opened my laptop again, this time with intention. I listened to the entire recording, start to finish, without stopping. I took notes, exact phrases, dates, names. She was careful, precise. She didn't rant, she documented. When it ended, I sat in silence for a long time. This wasn't just emotion, this was evidence. I didn't tell anyone about the recording, not Denise, not Trevor, not even the friends who'd been checking in on me since the funeral. Information had weight now, and I was done handing it out for free. Instead, I started calling professionals. The first attorney I spoke to was polite but cautious. The second was sharper, asked better questions. The third one, Elena Morris, listened without interrupting, then said, "Do not share that recording with anyone else until we secure it properly." Her calm steadiness felt like oxygen. I met her in person that afternoon. Her office was smaller than Mr. Klein's, less polished,
but everything about her screamed competence. She reviewed the will, Dad's likely claims, and then asked the question that mattered most. Did your grandmother ever say she was afraid of him? Yes, I said without hesitation. Elena nodded. Good. Fear changes the legal landscape. We talked strategy, discovery, how Dad's document might fit into the timeline, how coercion undermines consent, how recordings, when authenticated, can reshape a case. But, she said carefully, we don't rush this. If your father believes he has the upper hand, we let him believe it. I thought of his smile in that hallway, the certainty. That won't be hard, I said. Elena smiled faintly. Good. Overconfidence makes people sloppy. That evening, I drove to Grandma's house for the first time since the will reading. I hadn't gone because Dad told me not to, and I realized, standing in the driveway, that I'd listened out of habit more than fear. The house looked smaller than I remembered, but it still smelled like her. Clean linen, lemon soap, and something floral I'd never been able to name. I walked room to room, slowly, touching familiar things, grounding myself. Then I started searching. Not rifling, not panicking, just looking, the way Grandma had taught me, methodical, respectful. In the desk drawer, I found copies of bank statements Dad had claimed he managed. In the file cabinet, there were notes in the margins, questioning withdrawals. In the kitchen junk drawer, a folded piece of paper with a single sentence written in tight handwriting. He asked me to sign again. I said no. My chest tightened. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, about refusing to be erased. I photographed everything and uploaded it to the secure folder Elena had set up for me. By the time I left the house, the sun was low, and the weight on my shoulders felt different. Still heavy, but balanced. When I got back to my apartment, my phone had 3 missed calls from Dad. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Instead, I forwarded his number to Elena and went to bed for the first time feeling like I wasn't walking blind into a storm. The next morning, the official notice arrived. Petition to contest will. Reading his claims in black and white made my hands shake again. He accused me of isolating Grandma, of influencing her decisions, of exploiting her declining health for personal gain. Every line was a lie dressed up as concern. Elena called me within the hour. He's going all in, she said. Good, I said. Good? Yes, she replied calmly, because now he has to prove it. As we spoke, I realized something that made my stomach drop. Dad had built his case assuming one thing, that Grandma had died without leaving a voice behind. That assumption was about to cost him everything. But not yet. Not until the timing was right. The first court notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between grocery store flyers and a credit card offer like it was just another piece of mail. I stood in my kitchen staring at it for a full minute before opening it, my coffee going cold on the counter. My name looked strange printed there, formal and sharp, like it belonged to someone older, someone tougher. In the matter of the estate of Ruth Eleanor Hale. Dad's handwriting wasn't on it, but his presence was everywhere. The language was cold, procedural, and precise, exactly the way he liked things when he wanted to strip emotion out of a situation and replace it with authority. I scanned the document, heart pounding, until I found the part that made my stomach sink. Motion for expedited discovery. He wasn't wasting time. He wanted access to everything. Grandma's medical records, phone logs, emails, my text messages, even my work schedule from the last 6 months of her life. He was building a timeline, trying to paint me as someone who appeared suddenly and took over. Elena called me as I was reading. He's pushing fast, she said. That tells me he's afraid of something. I replied, or confident. Confidence doesn't rush. Control does. She walked me through what would happen next. Filings, responses, deadlines. Depositions. The word alone made my throat tighten. Sitting in a room while my father's attorney dissected my life felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "What about the recording?" I asked. "Not yet," Elena said firmly. "That's not a shield, that's a sword, and you don't swing it until you have to." That afternoon, Dad's campaign moved from paper to people. Denise called first. "Morgan," she said, voice strained, "your father is very upset, I imagine. He's saying you've been difficult," she continued, "that you're letting grief cloud your judgment." I leaned against the counter, exhaustion washing over me. "Did he mention threatening me?" Silence. "That's what I thought," I said. Denise sighed. "Court will tear the family apart. So will lying," I replied. She didn't answer that. Trevor texted later something flippant about lawyers being expensive and maybe we could work something out. I didn't respond. Every message felt like pressure, like Dad had turned the family into a chorus repeating his concerns. By the end of the week, the legal bills started arriving. Consultation fees, filing costs, retainers. I paid them without complaint, but each charge felt like Dad reaching into my future and trying to take something else. The hearing date was set for 3 weeks out, 3 weeks to prepare, 3 weeks to be painted as a villain. Dad, on the other hand, was thriving. I saw him once at the courthouse when I went to file a response. He stood in the hallway laughing with his attorney, relaxed, confident, like he was back in his element. When he noticed me, he excused himself and walked over, smile already in place. "You look tired," I said. "I'm fine." He nodded toward the folder in my hands. "Discovery responses." "Yes." "Good," he said. "Transparency is important." I stared at him. "Is that why you're demanding my medical records from 10 years ago?" His smile didn't falter. "Pattern matters." I thought of Grandma's voice on the recording, the way she'd described his pressure, his manipulation. He was doing the same thing to me now, just with better paperwork. "Still time to settle," he added. "I can make this easier." "By taking everything?" I asked. "By protecting it," he corrected, "from you." I felt something inside me go very still. That night, I finally listened to the rest of the recording again, not as a granddaughter, but as someone preparing for battle. Grandma's words weren't just emotional, they were strategic. She talked about dates, witnesses, even mentioned the nurse by name. She'd built her own case, and she'd left it to me to finish. The next morning, Elena called with news that made my pulse spike. "Your father filed a motion requesting access to all digital devices in your possession, including laptops, phones, and external drives." My heart dropped. "He's phishing." "Yes, and he's getting close." I looked at the flash drive on my desk. He didn't know about it, not yet, but he was circling. "Do we need to disclose it?" I asked. Elena paused. "Not unless ordered, and I don't intend to let that happen." For the first time since this started, I felt something like control settle into my bones. Dad thought he was squeezing me, but every move he made only tightened the net around himself, because the more he pushed, the clearer it became what he was really afraid of, and soon enough, I would make him face it.
It happened on a Friday evening, the kind of quiet that makes everything feel a little unreal. I had just finished loading the dishwasher when I heard a knock at my door. Not the light, uncertain kind, the confident, familiar kind that assumes it belongs there. My stomach dropped. I didn't answer right away. I checked the peephole first. My father stood in the hallway, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like he was stopping by to help fix a sink. Behind him was a man I didn't recognize, holding a clipboard and smiling politely at nothing. I cracked the door but kept the chain on. "What do you want?" I asked. Dad's smile was warm, almost friendly. "I came to help you." "Help me with what?" "Sorting," he said, nodding toward the apartment. "There are family items here, things that belong to the estate. There are no estate items here, I said. Everything from Grandma's house is documented. That's not what this is about, he replied calmly. This is about transparency. The man beside him cleared his throat. Ma'am, I am a property recovery specialist. I stared at him. A what? Dad answered for him. He catalogs assets, makes sure nothing disappears during disputes. My heart started pounding. You don't have a court order. Dad's smile tightened. Not yet. Then you need to leave. The man shifted uncomfortably. Sir, maybe we should... Dad raised a hand, cutting him off. He leaned closer to the door, lowering his voice. Morgan, don't be dramatic. You know how this looks. How it looks is you trying to intimidate me, I said. He sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. I'm trying to protect my mother's legacy. I thought of Grandma's words. He thinks I don't understand what he's doing. I've already spoken to my attorney, I said. You should do the same. His eyes flicked past me, scanning the apartment like he was already inventorying it. You don't want to escalate. I laughed, sharp and humorless. You escalated the moment you filed. For a split second, the mask slipped, his jaw clenched, eyes darkening. Then he stepped back and raised his hands. Fine, we'll do this the hard way. He turned to the man beside him. We're leaving. As they walked away, Dad looked over his shoulder. Tell Elena hello from me. The door closed and my knees almost gave out. I locked every lock and sank onto the couch, shaking. My phone buzzed immediately. Dad, you're making a mistake. I forwarded the message to Elena without replying. Her call came within minutes. He showed up? Yes, I said, with someone else. That's good, she said. I blinked. Good? He just crossed a line, she explained. Document everything. That behavior won't play well in court. By Monday, Dad's attorney filed another motion, this one requesting emergency access to secure potential evidence. Elena responded within hours, opposing it and attaching my statement about the visit. Then came the voicemail. Dad's voice was soft, controlled. I don't know who's filling your head with ideas, but this isn't you. You're not cut out for this kind of fight. I listened to it twice before deleting it. That night I moved the flash drive, not because Elena told me to, because my instincts did. I drove to the bank just before closing and opened a safety deposit box in my name. The flash drive went inside, sealed in an envelope. The key felt heavy in my palm as I slipped it into my wallet. For the first time, I felt like I'd taken something back. The next court date loomed closer, and Dad's tactics grew louder. More filings, more accusations, more pressure through family channels. But something had changed. He was no longer trying to convince me. He was trying to get ahead of something. And that meant he suspected. Not the recording itself, but the possibility that my grandmother had left behind more than just paper. And if he suspected that, then it was only a matter of time before he made a mistake big enough to cost him everything.
By the time depositions were scheduled, my father had settled into a rhythm. File, accuse, pressure, repeat. Elena called it litigation by exhaustion. The idea was simple: overwhelm me until I made a mistake, ran out of money, or gave up just to make it stop. It was a tactic Dad had used my entire life, only now he had legal stationery to go with it. I didn't give him what he wanted. Instead, I prepared. Elena and I met twice a week, sometimes more. We built timelines down to the hour. We cross-checked hospital logs with visitor records. We pulled Grandma's banking history and matched every questionable withdrawal to days Dad had visited alone. Patterns emerged quickly. Money moved after his visits. Paperwork appeared after arguments. Pressure followed refusals. He's consistent, Elena said one afternoon, tapping her pen against the table, which is great for us. How? I asked. Because consistency exposes intent, she replied, and intent matters. The night before my deposition, I barely slept. I wasn't afraid of telling the truth, but I knew how Dad's attorney would frame it. Every answer would be twisted. every pause would be treated like a confession. Elena sat across from me at her desk and looked me straight in the eye. "Tomorrow," she said, "you answer only what's asked, nothing more. No explanations unless requested. And when they try to provoke you, because they will, you stay calm." "I can do that," I said. She nodded. "Good, because the more composed you are, the worse he looks." The deposition room was smaller than I expected. A long table, a court reporter, Dad's attorney, a man with sharp eyes and a polite smile that never reached them. Dad sat across from me, hands folded, looking almost bored. He didn't look at me once. The questions started simple: name, age, relationship to the deceased. Then they sharpened. "Isn't it true you increased your visits significantly in the final month of Ruth Hale's life?" "Yes," I said. "And isn't it also true that you had access to her financial documents during that time?" "I had access to her kitchen. Her documents were secured." Dad's attorney smiled thinly. "So you deny influencing her decisions." "I deny manipulating her. She made her own decisions." Dad shifted in his chair for the first time. "They asked about my job, my finances, my mental health history. Each question was designed to poke, to suggest instability without saying it outright. I answered calmly, carefully, truthfully. When it was over, Dad finally looked at me. His expression wasn't smug anymore. It was calculating. Later that week, Alina called with an update. "He's requested your phone records again, and now he's asking whether your grandmother ever recorded conversations." My grip tightened on the phone. "What did you say?" "That we're unaware of any such recordings," she replied. "Which is true. You're unaware of them being discoverable." I exhaled slowly. "That question," she continued, "means he's worried." Good. Then came Dad's deposition. We sat in a different room this time, but the energy was unmistakable. Dad leaned back as he answered, confident, dismissive, sure of himself. He described his mother as fragile, confused, easily influenced. He described me as emotional, directionless, conveniently present. Then Alina asked her questions. "Mr. Hale," she said evenly, "how many times did you ask your mother to sign documents in the final month of her life?" Dad frowned. "I don't recall." "More than once?" "I was assisting her," he replied. "Assisting or pressuring?" Alina asked. He smiled tightly. "I reject that characterization." She slid a document across the table. "Then you won't mind explaining this unsigned agreement you drafted." Dad's jaw tightened. As the deposition went on, his story wobbled. Dates didn't line up, details blurred. His confidence cracked just enough to show nerves underneath. Afterwards, Alina leaned toward me and whispered, "He's lying too broadly." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means, when we correct him decisively." That night, Alina called again. "I want you to listen carefully. We're not going to introduce the recording yet." I held my breath. Why? Because he's committed to his version now, under oath, repeatedly. I understood immediately. Let him build the lie. Let him repeat it. Let him lock himself into it. When the recording finally came out, it wouldn't just contradict him, it would expose him. I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my apartment, the city humming faintly outside my window. My father thought he was winning because he was louder, because he had money, because he was used to people backing down. He didn't realize something fundamental had shifted. This time, I wasn't reacting. I was waiting. And when the moment came, I wouldn't raise my voice. I'd let my grandmother's voice do it for me.
The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning, and my father arrived like he was attending a conference. Gray suit, crisp tie, confident stride. He didn't acknowledge me as he passed, just nodded to his attorney and took his seat at the polished table facing the judge. To anyone watching, he looked like a man with nothing to hide, composed, respectful, certain of his position. I sat beside Alina, hands folded, spine straight, reminding myself to breathe. This wasn't the moment. This was the setup. The judge opened the session with procedural remarks, then invited Dad's attorney to present their argument. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and launched into a carefully rehearsed narrative. They painted a picture of a devoted son burdened with responsibility, a mother in decline, a granddaughter who suddenly became indispensable at a convenient time. Every sentence was crafted to suggest manipulation without ever using the word. Dad watched the judge as his attorney spoke, nodding occasionally, as if confirming facts in his head. Then it was his turn. Dad stood and swore to tell the truth, his voice steady as he answered the judge's questions. He spoke about confusion, about medication, about how his mother, quote, wouldn't have understood the consequences of leaving everything to me. She depended on me, he said. I handled her affairs. The judge leaned forward slightly. Did you ever pressure your mother to sign documents she did not agree with? Dad didn't hesitate. No. The word landed cleanly, confidently. I felt Elena's hand brush lightly against my wrist under the table, a silent reminder to stay still. Did you ever attempt to override or undermine her stated wishes regarding her estate? The judge asked. No, Dad said again. Never. He spoke like a man used to being believed. His attorney followed up, reinforcing the narrative: confusion, concern, duty. When they finished, the judge turned to Elena. Miss Morris? Elena stood, calm and measured. Your Honor, before we proceed further, we request permission to introduce additional evidence. Dad's attorney stiffened. We object unless the evidence has been disclosed. It has, replied Elena smoothly, in accordance with the court's rules. The judge nodded. Proceed. Elena didn't rush. She laid the groundwork, dates, timelines, contradictions in Dad's testimony. She asked careful questions that highlighted gaps without filling them in. Then she said the words that made the room change. Your Honor, the estate possesses an authenticated audio recording made by Ruth Hale 2 weeks before her passing. Dad's head snapped toward me. For the first time since this started, he looked surprised. An audio recording? The judge repeated. Yes, Elena said, in which Miss Hale clearly states her intentions and describes the pressure placed on her. Dad's attorney was on his feet. We object. On what grounds? The judge asked. The attorney hesitated. Relevance. The judge raised an eyebrow. Overruled. Elena turned to the clerk. We request permission to play the recording. The judge nodded once. You may. The room went very quiet. Elena pressed play. At first, there was a faint rustle. Then my grandmother's voice filled the courtroom, thin but steady, unmistakably hers. This is Ruth Hale. I'm recording this so no one can say I didn't know what I was doing. A murmur rippled through the room. She spoke about my father by name, about documents he'd brought, about how he'd tried to stare her with talk of incompetence and control. I told him no, she said clearly, more than once. Dad stared straight ahead, jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. And if anyone says Morgan pressured me, that's a lie. She did what I asked. She listened. I felt tears burn behind my eyes, but I didn't look away. The recording ended. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the judge leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on my father. Mr. Hale, he said slowly, you testified under oath that you never pressured your mother. Dad swallowed. The judge raised a hand. You will answer when asked. The silence was heavy now, unforgiving. Dad's attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but it was too late. The damage was done. The judge looked back at Elena. Miss Morris, do you have additional evidence? Yes, replied Elena, but we believe the recording speaks for itself. The judge nodded, his expression hardening. Indeed. He turned back to my father. Mr. Hale, he said, I have serious concerns about your credibility. Dad's face had gone pale. For the first time, he looked like a man who realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid anymore.
And as the judge called for a brief recess, I understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't just about winning, this was about accountability, and my father had just stepped into the light he'd spent his life avoiding.
When the judge called a recess, no one moved right away. It was like the air itself needed a moment to adjust. My father stayed seated, staring straight ahead, his hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His attorney leaned in, whispering urgently, but Dad didn't respond. He didn't nod, he didn't argue. He just sat there, jaw locked, as if movement itself might make things worse. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the table, on the grain of the wood, on the small scratch near the edge where someone had carved initials years ago. Focusing on anything else felt safer than watching a lifetime of control slip out of his hands. Elena touched my arm lightly. "You did well," she murmured. I nodded, though my chest felt tight. Hearing Grandma's voice in that room had ripped something open in me. It wasn't just relief, it was grief all over again, sharp and sudden. The judge returned quickly, faster than I expected. Everyone stood, then sat again as he took his place, his expression firm and unmistakably changed. "Before we proceed," he said, "I want to be clear about what I've heard today." Dad's attorney shifted in his seat. I could sense the scramble happening beside my father now, the recalculations, the damage control. "Mr. Hale," the judge continued, "you presented yourself as a concerned son acting in your mother's best interests, yet the recording we just heard directly contradicts your sworn testimony." Dad's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Your Honor, I did not ask for an explanation," the judge said sharply. "I am stating an observation." Silence. The judge turned to Elena. "Ms. Morris, please outline the additional inconsistencies you referenced." Elena stood, composed. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't dramatize anything. She simply laid facts on the table one by one. Dates when Dad claimed he wasn't present matched against visitor logs that said otherwise. Withdrawals that occurred after heated conversations Grandma had documented. Draft agreements prepared by Dad that were never executed because Grandma refused to sign them. With each point, my father's posture collapsed a little more. Then Elena addressed the document Dad had brandished at the will reading. "The signature on that page matches Ruth Hale's handwriting style, but the surrounding text does not match any known drafts or language she used. We believe it was presented to her under pressure and never intended as a final directive." Dad's attorney stood quickly. "Objection, speculation." The judge didn't even look at him. Overruled. Dad finally spoke, his voice tight. "I was trying to help her." The judge fixed him with a steady gaze. "By repeatedly asking her to sign documents she clearly stated she did not want to sign?" Dad's mouth opened, then closed. The judge exhaled slowly. "This court takes allegations of undue influence seriously. What I am seeing here is not a misunderstanding, it is a pattern." My hands trembled slightly under the table. I pressed my fingers together until they stilled. The judge continued. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm inclined to deny the petition to contest the will." Dad's head snapped up. "Your Honor." "I am not finished," the judge said. The words landed like a final warning. "In addition," he said, "I'm considering sanctions for bad faith litigation and misuse of the court process." The room felt impossibly quiet. Sanctions. Dad's attorney leaned over, whispering furiously now. Dad shook his head once, like he couldn't quite accept what was happening. The judge turned his attention to me. "Ms. Hale," he said, "your grandmother took deliberate steps to ensure her wishes were honored. This court respects that." My throat tightened. I nodded, unable to speak. The judge glanced back at my father one last time. We will take a brief recess before issuing a formal ruling. As everyone stood again, Dad finally looked at me. Not with anger, with disbelief, like he couldn't understand how this version of events existed without his permission. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Dad's attorney pulled him aside, voice low and urgent. Dad ran a hand through his hair, the first sign of disarray I'd seen from him this entire process. Elena stayed beside me, a steady presence. "No matter what he says now," she whispered, "you don't engage." We waited. When we were called back in, the judge wasted no time. "The petition to contest the will is denied," he said plainly. "The will of Ruth Eleanor Hale shall be upheld as executed." I felt the words before I fully processed them. Relief flooded through me, warm and overwhelming. But the judge wasn't done. "Mr. Hale," he continued, "this court finds your conduct troubling. You pursued this action despite clear evidence of your mother's intent. As such, I am ordering you to reimburse Ms. Hale for reasonable legal fees incurred as a result of this contest." Dad's shoulders sagged. The judge's gavel came down softly. "This matter is concluded." Just like that, it was over. Outside the courtroom, Dad approached me for the first time without an audience. His face was pale, eyes rimmed red, not from tears, but from shock. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. I met his gaze, my voice calm. "I didn't, you did." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left for him to say. As he turned away, I realized something that felt both sad and freeing. The power he'd held over me my entire life hadn't disappeared. It had just stopped working. And that was enough.
The courthouse emptied faster than I expected. People drifted out in quiet clusters, conversations low, footsteps echoing against marble floors. I stood near the window for a moment, sunlight cutting across the tiles, and let myself breathe like someone who'd just come up from underwater. It was over. Not magically, not cleanly, but completely. Elena gathered her files with practiced calm. "I'll handle the fee reimbursement order," she said. "You won't need to speak to him again unless you choose to." Unless you choose to. The words felt strange. Choice hadn't been something I associated with my father for a very long time. Outside, the air felt sharper, clearer. I stepped down the courthouse stairs slowly, every muscle in my body buzzing with delayed reaction. Relief didn't arrive as joy. It came as quiet, like the absence of noise after years of static. My father stood near the curb. He looked smaller without the courtroom framing him. No judge, no microphone, no audience. Just a man in a suit that suddenly looked too expensive for the moment he was standing in. "Morgan," he said when he saw me. I stopped a few feet away. "I didn't think you'd actually play it," he said. I didn't answer right away. I studied his face, really studied it, and realized something that surprised me. He wasn't angry. He was exposed. "She had no right," he added tight, recording me like that. "She had every right," I replied calmly. "You gave reason." He scoffed, shaking his head. "You think you won?" I thought of Grandma's house, the quiet mornings she loved, the chair by the window where she read the same book over and over because she liked how it ended. "I think she did." His jaw clenched. "This didn't have to be public." "You made it public," I said. "You filed, you accused, you pushed." For a moment, I saw the old reflex in his eyes, the urge to turn it around, to rewrite the ending. But there was nothing left to leverage. The court had spoken. The tape had spoken, and I was done speaking. "I'll be in touch," he said finally, stiff. "No, you won't." I turned and walked away before he could respond. In the weeks that followed, things settled into place slowly. Paperwork, transfers, keys changing hands. The house on Maple Street became mine not as a trophy, but as a responsibility I carried with intention. I didn't rush to move in. I didn't renovate right away. I sat in the quiet first. I listened. Some nights I played the recording again, not for evidence, not for strength, but for comfort. Grandma's voice grounded me in a way nothing else could. She'd known this would be hard. She trusted me anyway. I'm Morgan Hale. I'm 29 years old, and for the first time in my life, I didn't let fear decide what I deserved. My father lost more than an inheritance that day. He lost the power of being believed without question, and I gained something far more valuable than property or money. I gained certainty. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story meant something to you, I'll see you in the next one.